Welcome to Find Your Strong, the podcast for anyone ready to ditch diet culture and find a kinder way to care for themselves.
We're Christine and Ella. Ella is a nutritionist.
And Christine is a personal trainer.
And we're both also intuitive eating counsellors and ready to be your guides through this wild and wonderful non-diet space.
Every week we talk real-life well-being with experts, guests and each other, all with compassion and zero judgment.
So if you're ready, let's find your strong.
Hello, my lovelies. Thank you for tuning in to the Find Your Strong podcast this week. I'm flying solo today because sadly Christine wasn't very well for the recording. But I had the pleasure of speaking to the fabulous Aoife McMahon. I've known her for a little while because I do peer supervision with her. And I asked her to come on the podcast because she is an expert in GLP-1s, in particular with relation to eating disorders and disordered eating. She is a fabulous person. I'm going to read out her bio because I don't want to miss anything. So Aoife is a specialist eating disorder, disordered eating and body image dietitian. So she comes at it from a weight inclusive perspective. She supports individuals in one-to-one sessions to rebuild a peaceful relationship with food and their body. In addition to that, she works alongside colleague Rhian Houghton, I think I pronounced that correctly, to raise awareness and provide training for professionals regarding eating disorders in the context of GLP-1 medications. One of the greatest gifts Aoife has found through her work and through healing her own relationship with food and her body is being able to raise her family in a home where a peaceful relationship with food is simply the norm. And I love that so much. And I think it's so important to have the conversations around weight and weight loss drugs, but with a very open, compassionate, non-judgmental lens. And Aoife and I spoke about that today and how informed consent is really, really important in making the decision to go on a weight loss drug or not. And how little evidence there is in terms of long-term effectiveness, and also, about how do we support anybody who might be considering taking a weight loss drug. So hopefully this conversation is helpful to you. Maybe you are someone who is taking GLP-1s already. We wanted to make sure that working with someone who is an intuitive eating counselor, body image counselor, someone who works in the weight neutral space doesn't mean that you cannot work with them if you are taking a weight loss drug. In fact, seeking support from some professionals who are clued up on the weight loss drug, but also come at it with compassion and non-judgment could be really, really important. So yeah, listen to the conversation. Any comments, any questions, anything that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear from you. And without any further ado, here is our episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I am really excited because I'm talking to the lovely Aoife today. I know Aoife through a peer supervision group, which I started. When did I start that? Like a year or two ago?
Yeah, 1 or 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I should have checked the details. But yeah, so I've known Aoife since then, and I was very, very keen to have her on the pod because she is an expert in GLP-1s and in particular with regard to disordered eating and eating disorders. So I was really keen to have her on to tell us a little bit about the weight loss drugs and concerns and things to be aware of. But before we start with that, I'd love you to introduce yourself, if you don't mind. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, lovely. So, hello, I'm Aoife, and I am a weight inclusive dietitian. I work with body image, eating disorders, and disordered eating. And my main passion is just helping people to heal their relationship with food, eat normally, basically.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yes, it's a process, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you're also coming at it from a weight inclusive point of view, because
Mhm.
very often that isn't the case for dietitians in particular. Sadly, as we know through our peer supervision group, there's still a lot of weight stigma in the healthcare system, and in dietitians as well, especially those that are working with eating disorders. It's quite rife there, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, healthcare is a big perpetuator of weight stigma. And I mean, when I initially started in dietetics, I was working in weight loss surgery, weight loss medications, weight loss clinics as well. And I think it was similar to everyone else. It was just trying to find that key to help people to lose weight.
Mm.
But yeah, there were several reasons why I shifted into relationship with food work as well.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What sort of made you shift gears?
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose I knew I wanted to be a dietitian from a young age. I just sensed around me and felt the pressures for people to lose weight, and could see the impact of that to people close around me. And I thought the solution was weight loss.
Mm.
And then I decided I want to be a dietitian. And then I did my dietetics degree and I came out the other side of it and I didn't know how to support people to lose weight. And so then I went into the NHS and as I said, worked in weight loss surgery, worked in weight loss clinics. I also prescribed weight loss drugs. This was before GLP-1s,
Mhm.
but it's a unique position. Not many dietitians are in that prescribing position. Um, and when it comes to the weight loss medications, the weight loss clinics, I saw there was poor results. It wasn't people's fault. People were trying very, very hard. So there was very few people losing any significant amount of weight. And also I started to notice the power that the scales had. um, there was a slight shift in the scales upward, and it would dictate their mood. They would feel horrible. And if there was a slight decrease in the scales, that would lead to elation as well. And I just started to become incredibly uncomfortable that I was part of the force that was propping up that number of the scales in terms of importance in the people's lives. Because when I was listening to them and the lives that they led, um, having this disproportionate focus, negative focus on the number from where I was sitting was only causing additional stress.
Mm.
And so I actually was thinking of retraining because I felt so uncomfortable with it.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it was at that time that I found intuitive eating, weight
Yeah.
inclusive approach, and I have just only gone deeper and deeper into this world. And
Mhm.
whereas before, the odd person would lose weight, whereas most people, it was just distress and food obsession. Now, and I'm sure you're the same, Ella, it's like transformative work and you're helping people to reclaim their lives, and it's amazing. And I would never look back. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, once you've seen that side of things and how powerful it is and what a difference it makes to people's lives, it's really you can't really go back, can you? It's such a shift and such a transformation for people, which is hard to explain because, as you said, there's still so much weight stigma around, and so many people are hell bent on losing weight, and that's the only option we have. But and I think that probably resonates with quite a lot of people listening to this. It's absolutely miserable for a lot of people, and the scales dictate how you feel. Absolutely, I'm working with someone who had that experience, and it made them spiral. It's awful
Mhm.
when you step on the scales and you see a number, and it's not what you expected or wanted, and it dictates everything. It's really scary how much power it has over you, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
it can be 5, 10 years of people's lives, decades of people's lives,
Mm.
that are ruled by
Hmm.
this. Um, and then in contrast, when we're working towards relationship with food, relationship with body, like I recently had a client finish up last week, and I did a happy dance after our session because do you know what is that a feeling?
Yeah.
We'd done a solid piece of work together, 10 months. She came to me.
Wow.
She was binging, felt out of control around food, despised her body, couldn't face it in Pilates, when you're in different
Mm,
positions in the class without scrutinizing it. And then
mm,
to finish up last week, where she has confidence, she described her mind as being calm. She
mm,
doesn't agonize over food. It's just, and she said that it was like it changed her life. And
mm,
when you see stuff like that, as you said, we're in it, so we get to see the process and how beneficial it is.
mm.
But it can be really challenging to communicate that when people haven't had a taste of it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like so abstract for a lot of people, doesn't it? It's like how that will never happen to me. Why I would never be in a good relationship with food. Therefore, I might as well just focus on weight loss because that is just so, unthinkable for a lot of people,
A
definitely.
100%.
Yeah. I love that little
Yeah.
happy dance. I sometimes do that when we have a bit of a breakthrough or someone just really sort of absorbs the weight inclusive message and the made peace
Mhm.
with food and their bodies. That's just so beautiful to witness. Um, there are, however, lots of people who are not inclined to go down that route just yet and are considering possibly are even trying GLP-1s. We've been throwing that around, that word or that acronym, but it would be really, really helpful for you to give us a little overview of what is a GLP-1 drug. What are the differences to, say, diabetes medication? Because I think we sort of all have a basic understanding of, oh, it's a drug that we inject and we lose weight. But there
Mhm.
is so much misinformation and disinformation around it out there as well. And a lot of people might not actually have enough information to make an informed decision about them. And I think
Mhm.
that is absolutely vital for people to understand, well, this is what it does, this is what can happen, and this is what, the side effects are, and anything that you can share about it would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, lovely. And I think just the term you said there, informed consent, that's the most important thing when it comes to
Mm,
these medications. And there's so much information out there about them. And to be able to have a discussion, especially from a place where it's not funded directly from the weight loss companies themselves, is so
mm,
important. Um, but yeah, so GLP-1 medications, it stands for glucagon like peptide 1, and they are injected, as you say. These drugs themselves have been around, like you mentioned, in terms of diabetes. And so they support people with diabetes to manage their insulin, right? And some of the drug companies, when they have been doing trials for these diabetes medications, noticed that some people on the medications lost marginal amounts of weight.
mm,
And so they decided to shift these drugs and test these drugs out in the weight loss arena. Um, One of the important points about this shift is that many of the drugs, when they move into this weight loss arena, the dose is whacked up. Um,
mhm,
so when people, it's hard to get our heads around the fact that, well, if these drugs are already being used for diabetes, why is it so different when they're used in the context of weight loss? And that's one of the reasons. Um, I've not come across a medication before where, like in this case, we're focusing on the side effect of a diabetes drug. And normally with drugs, the idea is to get the optimum effect of the drug with minimal side effects as possible.
mhm.
Whereas in the case of these diabetes drugs, when we're shifting them into weight loss, um, we're actually trying to maximize what was a symptom of a drug to support your body to
Gosh,
manage
yeah.
blood sugars.
Mm.
So that's one of the things. Um, and oh, I'm losing myself now.
I
Is
just
there
find I
con?
find that very interesting to look at it from that point of view. Like weight loss is a side effect of the drug, and usually, as you said, we're trying to minimize side effects because we
Mhm.
see them as something negative. Here we see it as a positive that we want to amplify, which is
I've
wild, isn't it?
Yeah, I've not seen it before. I'm not a
No.
pharmacist, but
Oh,
it it
yeah.
shocks me that it's the side effects. And so what about the other side effects that come
Mm-hmm.
with that
Mm-hmm.
drug?
Exactly.
Um, and so in terms of the method of action, how it works, I like to focus a lot on, the symptoms that someone might experience, especially working with relationship with food.
Mm.
So these do primarily have an effect on appetite and appetite suppression. So we can think of them as like a superficial or artificial appetite suppressor. Um, but they also have effect on pleasure. So we've noticed that people can have a dampened pleasure response from food. And there are also reports of an impact to pleasure outside of food. So, for example, any activities that you enjoy, we have noticed that there can be an impact on what kind of pleasure that you'll gain from that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that's important is because when we're looking at side effects, as you mentioned earlier, one of the side effects of this drug is that it can have an impact to suicidal ideation, that's a heavy topic, but it gives an
Mm-hmm.
indication of the extent to which a drug like this may have an impact to someone's mental health. And pleasure from food and appetite, suppression of hunger, when we're thinking about it in the context of food and weight, there are many people, and even some people listening, understandably, who will tolerate that or see that as a route to weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's important to just broaden our understanding. This is not just food that this can impact, and pleasure from food is actually really important for our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other things that this drug can impact as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's a scary thought. I mean, in general, we would never ever judge anybody for making the decision to take a weight loss drug. I just want to put that out there, and Aoife, you're totally on that in that corner as well,
Yeah, of
as
course.
far as I know. But I think it's so important to know about these side effects. So the sort of, a lot of people might have heard that it suppresses appetite, but a lot of people probably won't have heard that it also suppresses any pleasure in food, but also broadens out to other aspects of life. I mean, that's we know that dieting can be really miserable because
Mhm.
we're not getting pleasure from food, we're not eating enough, we're not sort of enjoying life because it's just a load of directives like you can't have that, you can't have that, you must do this. And having the weight loss drug isn't like a magic solution because it can actually impact that even further by the sounds of it. And it kind of makes sense if you rack up the dose and I don't know, is it 4 times the dose of a diabetes
It's different depending
injection?
on which diabetes
Okay.
drug. Yeah.
Right, right. It kind of makes sense that all of that would be amplified as well. So the weight loss is amplified, but all of the other things that may not be so bad when you take it as a diabetes medication will
Mhm.
also be amplified. So would you say that that's part of this kind of loss in pleasure in general?
Um,
Is that
yes, sorry,
dose
what was
depend? I'm just thinking, is that dose dependent as well? Because that may not be so
yes, yeah, I think I see what,
perceptible
yeah,
when you are on a
yeah,
diabetes dose.
exactly. And that's why it is important to have this dose conversation,
Mm,
and the effect of pleasure may be minimal when the drug is being used for diabetes.
hmm
That being said, people with diabetes have higher incidences of depression compared with the general public. And
hmm
as I've been exploring these medications, it's not like it can be put down to these medications solely or anything like
hmm
that. But um, if that can have an impact to pleasure, then is that having an effect at all? And that's why it is important to look into these things. But the other thing that you mentioned there about not having any judgment towards anyone who takes these drugs, it is so understandable why people would have a draw towards these drugs. It's so understandable. And especially if someone has been trying to lose weight for however long it's been and it's just not working, or they're trying to control how much they're eating. They feel like it's out of control. They feel like once they start, eating, they just can't stop. And then these GLP-1 medications come along in terms of weight loss, and they promise hunger regulation, long-term weight loss. Of course, people are going to be interested in that. Of course, it makes sense. And when we do talk about the GLP-1 medications, I suppose from this point, it'll be in reference to the GLP-1 medications for weight loss as opposed to diabetes, because these are actually really important medications alongside the other medications that are available for diabetes management. But when we're talking about them, it's in the context of weight loss.
Yeah, yeah, sure. You just said long term. Can we elaborate on that? Because I am concerned about long term because I feel like we haven't really got any evidence that A, these drugs are safe long term, and B, that they actually work long term. Is there anything that you can sort of speak to when it comes to long term effects?
Yeah. So the weight loss medications themselves, as you said, one of the things that they are promising is long-term weight loss. When you look on their websites and everything, it's long-term weight loss is the big message, the big promise that they are talking about. When it comes to weight loss research, as someone I interact with weight loss research all the time, and then also people who experience and who desire weight loss. What we know from research is that people can lose weight short term, and we can see that around us as well. And we've experienced it, a lot of people will have experienced that themselves. People can lose weight, they can lose weight short term. It's the long term that these drugs are promising. But when it comes to weight loss research, what constitutes long term is when a research paper is 2 to 5 years plus. The weight loss companies or the drug companies have released research. The first piece of research was just over a year. And they pushed the drugs onto the market with this evidence. They have since increased it to 2 years. And what we see is there is a downward slope. So the weight trends down. And again, from drug to drug, it depends. But a lot of the time it's 15%, which means 50% or an average of 15% weight loss. So 50. Yes. Yeah. Which is the selling point of these drugs. That's what these drugs have hinged their marketing on. Because there have been injectable weight loss drugs on the market before, but they haven't produced that percentage before. But when we're looking at the percentage, so the average 15%, that means that 50% of people will have lost more, 50% will have lost less. But they stop at 2 years. And when looking at weight loss research, there's a phenomenon called the Nike tick of weight loss research. And that's where most weight loss interventions, whether it's dietary advice, whether it's a particular diet or a medication, can produce that downward slope, if you think of the front end of the Nike tick. But what happens is that over time, the weight loss, the weight regains again. And so I think we owe it to ourselves, as a society who has been offered so many weight loss interventions. I think we owe it to ourselves to demand more of the research, and that they do show that kind of 2 to 5 years plus of results, so that we can see it actually works long term. Because no one wants to be in a position where they're taking a medication, the weight is coming down, they're getting comments from people around them, they start to really invest in the weight that they lost, only for that to gain again. That's not what people are investing in their time and energy when they're looking at these drugs. And so they haven't, in the weight loss arms of these medications, they haven't actually gone beyond 2 to 5 years. So when they're promising long-term weight loss, they actually don't have the research to support that. There is one piece of research from Novo Nordisk, which is the company that produces Ozempic for diabetes, and then it's under the brand name Wegovy for weight loss. They produced a 4-year piece of research, and so that seems exciting because it's like, right, okay, we're getting long-term weight loss. What's interesting about this piece of research is that they didn't take it from the weight loss arm of their investigations of their research. This 4-year, this longer term piece of research is from a different subset. So it's from the research in terms of GLP-1 medications and heart health.
Okay.
So I have question marks around that. That's kind of curious that they would use that piece of the population in terms of what they actually found from the weight loss arm. But even with that population, there's a lovely slope downwards when we see looking at the weight. So the weight comes down and it does stay relatively stable for the 4 years. But when we look at the dropout rate of this research paper, it's astronomically high. So the dropout rate is 89%.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a high dropout rate, and we do see dropout rates that can be higher than your average research paper when it comes to weight loss, but it's still around the 40% typically. We do not see dropout rates of 89%. And again, when we're thinking about the standards for this drug, for myself, for my own safety, or for knowing that a drug works, I would like to know that they were using messaging or developing their messaging based on research that showed results for more than 11% of the population, right?
Yeah.
Where people could actually tolerate it for the 4
Yeah.
years. For any other medication, I would like to know that they had a richer research than here's a 4-year study, look at the downward slope, but actually this just over 10% of people left at the end of that study, which is not typical of research.
Yeah, that's a scary statistic. I mean, 89% of people dropped out for whatever reasons they would have had, but clearly it was to do with the fact that they didn't get on with the drug in one way or another. And I would imagine no one reports on that. They just fall out of the study.
Yes, we do not know what happens to those like 89, but as you said, the people who tend to show up tend to be the people who are getting positive results. And we just don't know what has been going on with that 89% of people.
Yeah.
And it may be that they, at minimum, it didn't work, but also they could have had negative experiences with the drug, and we just don't have that data.
Yeah, yeah, it's a hugely biased sample, but then that's something that, as a general population, member of the general population, you don't necessarily know or look into. You just hear what the drug company tells you, and you think, oh, that's great. All those people, they showed prolonged weight loss. And what I found interesting, and that's why I sort of double checked with you, the 15% average weight loss. That's an interesting one for me because I think that if someone who is in a very large body loses 15% on average of body weight, that will still mean that they are a person in a very large body at the end. So is there a bit of a misconception as to what these drugs are capable of in terms of weight loss?
Yeah, and expectation management is so important for the drug companies to manage, to prioritize. I've seen this before in weight loss surgery. There's a lot to learn from weight loss surgery when it comes to weight loss medications as well. But weight loss surgery, just like the GLP-1 medications, is promoted as this cure-all, and that you will lose an astronomical amount of weight and that your life will significantly improve, that kind of thing. But the weight loss results vary. There are people that really don't get significant weight loss from that, and there are people that do.
Mm-hmm.
And just like what we said with the 15%, in someone who has a smaller body, that's a more significant amount
Mm-hmm.
of their body weight. In someone who's a larger body, they may not feel that they have gotten a significant amount of weight loss from these medications. And the other thing is that that's 15% when someone is in a trial and that they have a big support team.
Mm.
And we often see higher levels of weight loss than when someone doesn't have as much support and they're not in
Right.
that trial. They don't have people checking on how they're getting on as regularly and the level
Mm-hmm.
that they would in that research. So yes, being really real and connecting with the actual numbers that are there and
Mm.
seeing what that will realistically look like. And the 15% is it's one number. As I said before, 50% will lose more, 50% will lose less.
Mm-hmm.
And then outside of a trial, it can be different as well.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really interesting and something probably people aren't really considering that it could, it could average that like that for you, or it could be more or less. Um, So we can't really tell people what to do, and we're not here in this capacity anyway to give people advice. But where can people go if they are on the fence? Because we talked earlier about informed consent and how important it is. I've heard stories of people just getting the drugs on the black market. No one really monitors it. All sorts of things happening. And you just mentioned support and how important that is. But
Mm.
where can people get that? Where can people go and get a very unbiased, very holistic view of what it would entail taking the drug and getting support if they are on it as well? What sort of things would you recommend?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And because of the scale of how fast these drugs have come on the scene,
Mm,
with weight loss as the focus, the support tends to circulate around that. Um, Unbiased support in an ideal world,
mm,
if you have access to private dietetic input,
mm,
that's something I offer, private support of people
mm,
who are not funded by the drug companies. Um, the other thing is, I suppose, and if you are considering this, I think a great support to yourself is to be able to fully consider the drug. Um, so I think some clinicians get nervous about encouraging people to really, really consider what it might be like taking this drug because
mm-hmm,
they might think the best way to approach this is to encourage people to steer clear of it, that kind of thing.
mm,
But people are not considering these drugs lightly,
mm-hmm,
um, and I actually think it's important for people if they are considering these drugs to actually lean into that and to sit down and consider it.
mm-hmm,
Um, and because of how challenging it can be to do this in a balanced way, because of how much we might be hoping for weight loss,
mm,
sometimes I encourage people to think about if it was someone that they really cared for that was considering one of these medications and write it from the perspective of that, take
mm-hmm,
down notes of the pros and cons, what it'd be like um, if they did lose weight, what it would be like if they statistically, what's most likely, regained the weight.
mm-hmm,
Um, and spending time with that, as I said, if it helps, thinking about it from the perspective of a loved one who's asking about these medications, what you would advise them. In an
mm-hmm,
ideal world, there would be much more support when it
mm,
comes to these things. And that's why I'm, kind of advising
mm-hmm,
something that you can do yourself is
mm-hmm,
because the resources at the moment are so limited or kind of private
mm.
support.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously we do understand that that's not accessible for everybody, the private support, but if there is a way, that is definitely the ideal to kind of go and get someone who understands the pros and cons of it and can sort of support you through it. I love what you said about, think about it in terms of what would you say to a loved one about it, because we use that a lot with generally how do you speak to yourself, but I hadn't really considered it in terms of weight loss drugs, and to kind of really talk to yourself as if you were talking to a loved one and going over the pros and cons in a compassionate way rather than in a just focused on the weight loss and not thinking about, what effects other than the weight loss might this actually have on you. So I love that. That's really beautiful. Um, I we were talking about sort of the weight stigma in healthcare settings and the lack of support that there is for people who are considering these drugs. And you and your colleague Rhian are doing something incredible. And I want you to share with us, because there may well be someone from a healthcare setting listening to this, or someone who knows someone who works in whatever capacity in the healthcare service. You and Rhian have developed a fantastic webinar on this, in particular with regard to disordered eating and eating disorders and the use of GLP-1s. I attended the webinar. It's super, super informative. I think anybody in this arena, in the nutrition dietitian arena, would absolutely benefit from it. But also anybody who may work with people who are in larger bodies, who are considering weight loss. Can you tell us a little bit about the webinar, how it came about, and how people can maybe access it if they wanted to?
Yeah, wonderful. And thanks for the kind feedback. It's always
Oh,
lovely
it's
to hear
brilliant.
that as
Honestly,
well.
it was brilliant. It's so, so helpful because it does start from like, what is this? What it is all about, and the way that you sort of separated the kind of this is the weight loss drug, and then you went on to talk about the relation to eating disorders and the dangers that come with that. I thought it was just a really well structured and very, very informative webinar that I would just recommend anyone really watch it, but it's obviously geared towards people in healthcare settings. So.
Yes, yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, so myself and Rhian had actually joined up originally to start to develop training on bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, and eating disorders,
Mhm.
and the importance of putting that on the map. As I said before, I used to work in weight loss surgery, and it is there are so many people who would benefit from being picked up a little bit earlier,
Mm.
in terms of eating disorders. So we were developing that training, as you said, geared towards healthcare professionals at that time. And then the two of us just noticed how prevalent these GLP-1 medications were becoming and starting to become.
Mhm.
Um, Both of us have experience in both weight inclusive care and weight loss surgery and weight loss medication. So we both come from that perspective. We haven't been funded by any drug companies to
Mm.
produce this training, which I think is really unique. Unfortunately, there's plenty of research, or there's plenty of training out there that people can access. And it'll give you good information potentially on what these drugs are, how they work, what the research says.
Mhm.
But I have not yet seen training out there from an independent source who will then also put relationship with food on the map. And when it comes to any drug that impacts the digestive system in any capacity, there is potential for an impact to relationship with food. And then the other thing is any weight loss intervention can come with a risk
Mhm.
of worsening someone's relationship with food in their body, or making an eating disorder or disordered eating they already have more complex.
Mhm.
So our training, we've delivered it. We initially delivered it just to dietitians, but we both really see the value in any professional who is interacting with people who are interested in GLP-1s. And if you are having conversations with them in any kind of way, the more people are savvy to the relationship with food piece, the
Mhm.
better,
Mhm.
because it's so significant and it's really underspoken about at the moment. So yeah, we have a webinar, and we also do bespoke training. If people are interested, then they're more than welcome to get in contact with myself or Rhian. Um, is it okay if I pop email details on the show notes of this
Oh, if that's
podcast?
okay
Is
with
that
you, we would love to
Yeah.
share that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then other than that, I'm on Instagram at
Mhm.
that Irish dietitian. I'm managing my social media presence at the moment, so I'm not always present, but
Yeah.
I do have more of a presence on there when we are starting to gear up towards another webinar and when we're releasing another webinar. So you'll be able to hear more about it there.
Brilliant. Perfect. Wonderful. So you're opening it up basically to anyone who's interested in it.
Yes, and the last webinar that we ran, we had nutritionists, we
Mhm.
had PT, we've had pediatricians involved. So it's not just dietitians that are watching this. Oh, and psychotherapists and psychologists. Big shout out,
Fantastic.
yeah, because we love having people in the mental health therapists, psychotherapists involved as well,
Mm.
because this is coming up in those spaces too.
Yeah, definitely. And part of what you do when people sort of sign up and book on the webinar is you send out lots of resources. And one of the resources I thought was something that everyone should have who works with people, full stop, is a very sort of basic assessment of relationship with food and whether there is something that kind of puts a red flag up in terms of, is there something distressing around that relationship? And I think whether someone is interested in taking GLP-1s or not, I think that would be the gold standard for any kind of healthcare professional to kind of flag symptoms of disordered eating and a potential eating disorder, because that needs to come first before we go anywhere near weight loss medication, because
Mhm.
it's just such a massive risk that people take when they are in an eating disorder and then they're considering these drugs, right?
100%. So yeah, one of the stats that I mentioned in the training is that up to a third of people who are interested in treatment for their weight
Mm.
may have a binging type eating disorder.
Hmm.
And so as clinicians, when someone comes into our clinic or if it's on Zoom, in our virtual room, we have to be very mindful that that person may or may not have an eating disorder. And most
Hmm.
eating disorders are undiagnosed. Most people
Mm.
won't have a formal diagnosis of them. So it won't be a simple question of, oh, do you have a history? Do you have an eating disorder? And yes or
Mm.
no. It requires really careful consideration. And then, as I mentioned before, these weight loss drugs themselves have significant potential to worsen someone's relationship with food, unfortunately. If someone has a poor relationship with food and then this GLP-1 medication is layered on top of that. I
Mm.
was saying this to you, Ella, before we hopped on the call. Sometimes it can be difficult to actually discuss every which way that this
Mm.
drug can negatively impact someone's relationship with food because there are just so many different avenues that someone can go down.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's really careful when I'm thinking about, have my clinician hat on. If anyone who is interacting with people who are interested in these drugs, or if your profession involves speaking with people about food or their well-being or mental health, that being able to have these conversations with more confidence
Hmm.
um, is so beneficial and so important. And some people think it's like outside of their scope or it's opening a can
Mm.
of worms, that kind of thing. But it's really not. People, whether or not we ask about them, people have eating disorders and have disordered
Hmm.
eating. And whether or not we ask about GLP-1s, so many people right now are considering them or may already be taking them, and we just don't know.
Hmm.
So to be able to be that safe professional that holds those conversations and allows space for them, then we're able to see our client or the person we're working with where they're really at and help them there
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I love that so much. Absolutely. And it makes it a very non-judgmental, compassionate way of supporting somebody because, at the end of the day, we have no say in what someone does or decides to do, but we have the unique position to to guide, to be what's the to kind of just be there and hold their space, basically, to kind of say, look, I have this information that I can share with you. There's no judgment. However, I feel like it's really important that you understand to make a
Mm-hmm.
decision with all of
Mm-hmm.
the information that you can
Mm-hmm.
possibly have.
Yeah, yeah. I think the people that I work with are probably tired of me saying this, but I often say when I'm talking in session that it's really important that you feel like you're in the driving seat of your care.
Yeah,
And the minute you don't feel like that,
yeah.
um, if you can voice it as much as possible, so we can get back to that place.
Mm,
And I think you're the same, Ella. I value patient autonomy
mm-hmm,
so highly. I think it is the most important thing
mm-hmm,
for one of the most important things for us to respect.
mm-hmm,
Um, and being able to have that discussion of I'm not prescribing these medications for the most
mm-hmm,
part. Most people who are taking this training
mm-hmm,
aren't, but you may be.
mm-hmm,
I'm not prescribing them. I'm not telling you to take them. I'm not injecting them into your body, or I'm not withholding them from you. I'm not going to go into your house and take them from wherever it is you're storing them. And, you know,
mm-hmm,
that kind of thing. That's not my role.
mm-hmm,
Um, my role is to hear you out.
mm-hmm,
You know, 100% makes sense why you would desire
mm-hmm.
these drugs.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what that might look like and whether it
Mm-hmm,
serves you.
mm-hmm.
So we can have real conversations about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really lovely note to end on because I think it's the real conversation that really matter. It's not we're not sugarcoating anything, but we're also not telling people what to do. Basically, we're here to guide and to hold space and to as you said, hear people out and have that discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Lovely. It's been so lovely, Aoife, to speak to you today. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and your expertise. I will pop everything in the show notes of how people can get in touch with you. Is there anything else before we say goodbye that you wanted to say or ask or share?
No, it's been lovely having me on. Thanks a million, Anna. It's been a really good conversation, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.